President Trump strikes an arrangement to send Ukraine more U.S. weapons, including Patriot air defense batteries that will be paid for by NATO allies. Meantime, Vladimir Putin continues to increase his aerial barrages of Kyiv and other cities, including an attack overnight on Friday that included hundreds of drones.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome, I'm Kyle Peterson with the Wall Street Journal. We're joined today by my colleague, editorial board member Jillian Melchior, based in London, who has been covering the war in Ukraine for the Journal's opinion pages since the beginning, and who's currently there in the capital of Kyiv. Jillian, you were there last week during some of these intense aerial bombardments, some of the most intense ones of this conflict. Your piece in Monday's Wall Street Journal newspaper is under the headline, Russia Intensifies Its Drone War. Give us a sense of what it's like there and what you've seen as a witness to this awful history.
Yeah, it's definitely pretty intense. So I've been to Kyiv quite a few times since the war began. And one of my sources observed, and I thought he put this well, that he had an understanding in the past week or so that now Kyiv is Kharkiv. And what he means by that is, so far in the war, we've seen cities close to the front line under really heavy attack, but now Russia is striking deep in the rear, and Kyiv is getting hit with the same or comparable intensity. So what that looks like in practice is, it's about 10 o'clock at night. It might be a long night. So you go back and try to go to sleep, but you know that when your head hits the pillow, it could be 45 minutes, it could be 2 hours, but the air raid sirens might go off. And if they go off, you don't really know what's going to happen, but you better get to the shelter if you're risk averse. So I always head to the shelter. You can pull up on Telegram. The Air Force has details about what's potentially incoming. So it'll tell you if drones are headed your way, if there's a ballistic missile threat. A lot of folks in Kyiv go for the ballistic missile threat, don't go for the drone threat. But yeah, you're just kind of sitting in the shelter indefinitely. And when these strikes start hitting, what you hear above you is like a pop, pop, pop sound. And that's hopefully air defense taking it on. What we've seen is Russia sending in just these massive waves of drones, hundreds at a time. And the goal is a couple of them. First of all, to overwhelm Ukrainian air defense. And then they send in these Shaheeds, and they've really gotten a lot more technologically sophisticated. And the idea is to terrorize civilians, but also overwhelm air defenses so that Russia can strike high-value targets. And so, yeah, it was pretty crazy. I'm sitting in the shelter following this whole thing on Telegram from what Ukraine's Air Force is telling us, looking on Twitter, hearing the sounds above me. You can see online daredevils who are out on the streets are posting social media. So you can see like the city explosions above you and on fire. And on the most intense night that I was here, it lasted from, I think, about midnight, if I recall, till 5 a.m. And I got up and the sun was coming up. And it was kind of surreal. Like you come out of the shelter and it's a beautiful dawn, but it was really cloudy because of the smoke and it smelled like things were on fire. And then you go upstairs and hope that you can get a couple hours of sleep before your meetings. People aren't really scheduling stuff until 11 or noon because they know that this might happen. But yeah, the coffee lines are around the block. Tried to find an eye mask, had to go to a couple of places because they were sold out. I think that gives you some color on people trying to sleep in these shelters and during this chaos. But overall, the mood's really calm. Like Ukrainians don't panic easily. They are pretty angry, though.
It sounds like the barrages are coming in mostly overnight. What is it like during the day? The coffee shops, you say, are open, stores are open, daily life seems to be continuing more or less?
Yeah, it's really surreal. Like you get up after one of these strikes and everybody looks exhausted. Like a source and I were talking about how it looked like everybody looked like it was final exams. Like we're all just sitting in coffee shops, just so tired. People are really gentle with each other. I think there's kind of a mutual effort to keep morale up. But yeah, you can go to the coffee shop, and some of my favorite coffee in the world is at cafes in Kyiv. The city's still functioning. People are still doing political meetings. So yeah, during the day, it could be any city in Europe. And during the night, it feels like the front line.
You also write about a air raid warning app that Ukraine has with warnings that are coming in voiced by Mark Hamill the actor from Star Wars who played Luke Skywalker, which is an interesting bit of color.
Yeah, that's right. He warns you not to be overconfident. And then I think at the end, he says something like, the air alert is over. May the force be with you. And it's one of those Western shows of solidarity that I think helps keep Ukrainian spirits high.
What are you hearing about the balance of forces here in these drone battles as each side tries to keep its weaponry up with the other? And it seems like there is some concern that the Russian production, the speed and scale of this drone production continues to increase, and the swarms that are coming in could soon be 1,000 or more, which I can only imagine puts a real strain and stress on air defense resources.
Yeah, that's right. So I want to make 2 points about this. One, which would not have occurred to me. When I'm talking to civilians here in Kyiv, I ask them whether they think that Ukraine is winning or losing the war, or if it's stalemated. And civilians are saying that they feel like Ukraine is losing. And that's something that I haven't heard before. However, when I talk to military people or volunteers, and particularly people who've been to the front line, so like out in the east near Donbass or up north near Sumy, what they're saying is that the ground battle is actually not going that bad for Ukraine, that Russia's tried to make advances, that it had this really ambitious offensive plan for the summer, and that it's gaining territory, but the territory is not strategically significant. It's not even operationally significant. So to a layman, it looks like they're grabbing a lot of land, but it doesn't actually matter that much to the course of the battle. So what the military folks say is that Russia is switching its kind of tactic or approach. And that's what's behind these huge airstrikes. Part of it's intended to have a psychological effect and discourage and demoralize Ukrainians. It is having that effect, but it's also making them pretty angry and determined. Part of it's to overwhelm air defenses and stress them out. But yeah, the scale is really staggering. I mean, we're talking about in a night, as many or double in a single night as in the entire month in June 2024. I'm hearing that Russia's producing between 100 and 170 drones per day. There seems to be a bit of a rhythm where it will save them up for a couple days and then concentrate the bulk of its attack on one city, which is pretty overwhelming. And Russia's really had a technological leap in drones. So we're talking about like Ukraine had been dealing with these largely by mobile defense units. These are guys out in trucks on fields with machine guns trying to knock drones out of the sky. But Russia was able to make these drones fly in higher. And so it's tough to intercept them before they're over a city. They also kind of dive down now like ballistic missiles, which is a trajectory that's tougher to intercept. And then you have debris kind of falling on the city. They're improving their anti-jamming technology. They're making these drones more lethal when they hit their target. So you've seen Russia really have this jump in both the technology and the scale of its drones. And Ukraine's, it's not as well funded. It's not as big of a country as Russia. And so it's been kind of trying to do this MacGyver thing and been pretty successful, but it didn't anticipate that its solution, these mobile ground units, would become obsolete so quickly. So they have the technology. They've got drones that are able to intercept other drones in the sky, but they haven't scaled it up to the volume of being able to take on 400 or 500 or 700 drones a night. So they're playing catch up at this point. And I just keep hearing from people it's cat and mouse, but Ukraine needs more resources to be able to ramp up scale. And if you look at their capacity, right now I'm hearing more than $30 billion in weapons production capacity. They only have about $10 billion to spend on it, though. So that's a bit of a missed opportunity to give Ukraine a leg up.
On the point about demoralizing Ukraine's defenders and the civilian population, the effort of Vladimir Putin to do that, what are you hearing in terms of determination to fight on or hopes for any kind of negotiated settlement of the kind that President Trump seems to keep pushing for?
Yeah, so that's been a tough question to ask. Like I've been framing it to Ukrainians as, are you willing to fight to the last man? And they don't like that question. They're basically saying like, yes, we are, but there is a finite number of us. But I think that the dilemma that they are in is the peace that is on offer by Vladimir Putin. It's not, I think, how some Americans are thinking about peace, we're kind of thinking about it as, oh, maybe they give up some territory, but there would be a ceasefire more or less along current lines. You'd be able to arm Ukraine. That's not what Putin's offering. He's saying, I get the territory that I've taken so far. You have to give me more territory on top of that. And on top of that, you have to declare neutrality and forego any future shipments of foreign weapons, and you have to downsize your military. So Ukrainians basically believe that if they give in to the peace that's on offer on the table right now, that it's going to render them defenseless, and that Putin's goal of taking over Ukraine hasn't changed. They also believe that this, they'll refer to it as a terroristic war. I think what they're actually talking about, though, is they view this as an existential fight for Ukraine and for Ukrainians. If you look at what's happening in occupied territory and to prisoners of war, Ukrainians are pointing out this looks genocidal. People who are, taken by the Russians are often tortured or killed in really brutal ways. And so you hear a lot of, they don't view the choices between war and peace. They view it as dying on their feet and dying on their knees. And they'd rather die on their feet. But they don't want that choice. They want to win.
And it does take two parties to make a peace deal. President Trump seems to have been frustrated by the reluctance of Vladimir Putin to make any sort of serious offer or negotiation. He's in a White House meeting today on Monday with the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. And part of what he said was, my conversations with him, meaning Putin, are very pleasant. And then the missiles go off at night, unquote. And so that has been part of the remarkable, fascinating turn President Trump has made from the guy who said when he was running for president, I'm going to solve this war. It'll be very easy. We'll do it in 24 hours, to taking a harder and stiffer line with Putin. Part of what he said in this White House meeting is that he is hoping for a peace deal within 50 days. At that point, he is ready to impose very severe tariffs on Russia, as well as secondary tariffs on other nations that are dealing with Russia. And then he's opening a new channel for supplying U.S. weapons to Ukraine's defenders. Those weapons will be paid for and purchased by NATO allies. Here's part of what the president said.
We've made a deal today where we're going to be sending them weapons and they're going to be paying for them. The United States, will not be having any payment made. We're not buying it, but we will manufacture it and they're going to be paying for it. Our last meeting of a month ago was very successful in that they agreed to 5%, which is more than $1 trillion a year, so they have a lot of money. And these are wealthy nations. They have a lot of money and they want to do it. They feel very strongly about it, and we feel strongly about it too. But we're in for a lot of money and we don't want to do anymore, and we can't. But we make the best, and we're going to be sending the best to NATO, and in some cases to maybe, at Mark's suggestion, if we go to Germany, where they're going to send early on missiles.
Jillian, what do you make of this? I think that's a notable turn by the president, because he seems to be acknowledging that it is not in the U.S. interest for Russia to have a complete victory here, for the United States to wash its hands of this conflict of aiding the defenders of Ukraine, maybe let Russian troops overrun the Ukrainian lines and break into Kyiv, take the whole country. And yet he is also, I think, trying to offer something to his MAGA base that doesn't like Ukrainian aid. By saying this is going to be weapons that are going to be built in America and are going to be sold to Europe, paid for by Europe. I think that's an interesting way to approach the problem, the political problem, the political corner that President Trump is in, of trying to figure out how to figure out how to keep these weapons flowing in a way that is politically palatable to his supporters.
Yeah, I think that's really important. So the Patriots are really welcome here. This is one area where Ukraine is over-reliant on the United States. So Patriots are the only thing that can take down a ballistic missile. Russia's been ramping up domestic production of ballistic missiles, getting some of them from North Korea. And when they hit, they're unstoppable and they do a lot of damage if you don't have Patriots. So we're talking about terrorizing civilians, but also hitting, Ukraine's military sites that it relies on to sustain the front. So that's something that's really important as a defensive capability. I'll be interested to see if Ukraine is given anything that lets it go strike into Russia. I mean, they've been developing technology on their own, and we saw this with Operation Spiderweb that knocked out the Russian strategic bombers. But, intercepting is not the most efficient way to fight this war. It's shooting down the arrows when you could be shooting down the archers. And I think that's something Ukraine is thinking about a lot. And if Trump wants to send a serious signal to Putin, that would be one way to do it.
Jillian, what do you think are some of the lessons for the United States and the Pentagon in watching how this drone warfare is played out? Because I take the point that the Patriots are important in defending allies, friends, Ukraine, the United States from ballistic missiles and that kind of large hardware. But how does it change the approach if you also have maybe hundreds or more than 1,000 drones and drone decoys that are coming in at the same time?
Yeah, it's overwhelming. One thing I didn't appreciate fully until this trip is just how quickly the technology changes. So here in Ukraine, pretty much every brigade, like somebody was describing it to me as Silicon Valley. Ukraine's got a great civil society, great ingenuity. And brigades will be working with inventors saying like, hey, here's a problem, we need a solution. And they'll be battle testing it and figuring out these solutions really quickly. But drone technology becomes obsolete in 3 months, 6 months. So that's extraordinarily fast to come up with an idea, combat test it, and then scale it up on the scale that you need. And if Ukraine is struggling to do this, being one of the most flexible places to do it, I don't think we've seen warfare like this, but they've been able to keep up well, sometimes stay ahead of Russia. The fact that they've been outpaced is disturbing to me because when I'm looking at Western procurement, I'm hearing about, timelines of a year, 2 years, months. And I think that both in terms of scale and in terms of technology, there's a real risk of being overwhelmed. And if your air defense gets overwhelmed by drones, you're going to have a hard time taking on some of the bigger stuff. I mean, it's really a multi-level threat. Ukraine's been good at figuring out solutions to that. It's going through a tough moment right now. But I think this gets to a point that I want to make, which is I think that the United States tends to view Ukraine as a beneficiary nation and the US as a donor nation. But Ukraine is testing this technology and gaining experience that's really important to us. And you can bet that Russia is learning from it, but also China is learning from Russia's experience. And I sure hope that we have Ukrainian expertise to rely on if we need it, because they do have expertise and experience that we do not have.
And part of the difficulty with this new drone warfare is just the asymmetry, because these drones are pretty cheap, relatively speaking. They're pretty easy and fast to build, relatively speaking. And the challenge, this is not true only in Ukraine. It's been the challenge with some of the efforts to deter the Houthis, is that if Western powers end up shooting extremely expensive missiles, defense systems at these cheap drones, you have a cost asymmetry, you have a supply asymmetry, because it's easier and faster to refill those attacking drones than it is to refill those Patriot batteries. And so part of the story and part of what will be interesting to see, Jillian, is what the defenders of Ukraine come up with in terms of drone countermeasures, if they can improve their drones that are designed to take down the incoming drones. That could be some hardware and technology and military thinking lessons that would go a long way in this new era of warfare that I think the Ukraine conflict is a great example of.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that counter drone technology, the interceptor drone, that's something that Ukraine's already done successfully. The challenge is now to get it to scale. But I've been asking people, like, what's coming in the next 3 months or the next 6 months? And they're talking about drones that are much faster. So fly with the speed of a cruise missile, potentially nuclear powered drones. That's pretty freaky to think about. AI powered drones where they withstand jamming because you don't need to send them a signal. The AI can zero in on a target. So this is moving just hair-raisingly, bone-chillingly fast. And I sure hope the West is keeping up.
One final thought here, just on the alignment of powers. Am I right in understanding that a lot of these drones that are coming in from Russia are of an Iranian type design?
Yeah, so this is interesting. There's Shahed type drones. I was talking to somebody today who was saying the Russians aren't very happy because they have technologically improved on these drones significantly. They're calling them the Geron drones or geraniums. They're sending flowers to Ukraine is the sick sense of humor. But they're upset that they're not getting credit for it. Ukrainians are still calling them the Shaheeds. But yeah, it's a real problem that, I think we were very focused on non-nuclear proliferation when Iran was proliferating cheap, lethal drones the other direction. And that's a threat we should have been paying more attention to.
But it does underline that these powers that are averse to the United States are connected. I mean, another headline that I saw recently was about the amount of artillery that Ukrainian forces think is coming in from North Korea. Here's a headline in the Kyiv Independent. North Korea supplied Russia with 12 million rounds of 152 millimeter shells, South Korean intelligence estimates. And so it is not that this is an independent conflict, because these U.S. adversaries are helping each other, including in these attacks on European soil.
Yeah, you're right. I think we're seeing a lot more collaboration between Russia, China, North Korea, and until recently, Iran. And it's U.S. adversaries seeing an opportunity. I don't know that the U.S. and Europe is appreciating the stakes of this war, but the rest of the world is definitely looking at Ukrainian defeat as a broader Western defeat.
Thank you, Jillian. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Potomac Watch.